Welcome to The Explainer. Some of the biggest fortunes in India, they've been built in almost complete silence. These guys weren't chasing the latest trends. They were mastering the mundane, the boring stuff. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain on these quiet titans. We'll look at the surprisingly simple playbook they use to generate just staggering wealth, all while flying way under the radar.
All right, let's start with a little bit of a puzzle. What are your innerwear, your motorcycle, and even your job search? What do they all have in common? Now, I know it sounds totally random, right? But the answer? It actually points to this really powerful business secret, a secret that has quietly made a ton of money for the people who figured it out.
So what's the answer? Well, each of these brands you know and love, they're really just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath, there's this powerful, often totally invisible parent company. And these are what we're calling the quiet titans. The giants who built absolute empires by just ignoring the headlines and doubling down on the fundamentals. Okay, so let's dig in and see exactly how they pulled this off.
All right, so how did they actually do it? Well, we're going to start by looking at the first piece of their playbook. And it's a strategy that, honestly, it seems to go against everything we hear today. It's about how focusing on, let's call them boring industries, turned out to be an absolute stroke of genius.
Their whole strategy really boils down to one core idea: niche domination. Think about it. While everyone else was running around trying to be everything to everybody, these companies did the exact opposite. They decided to become the absolute, undisputed masters of one specific thing. They picked a lane, usually a lane nobody else wanted, because it wasn't glamorous, and they just completely owned it.
Let's look at Page Industries, a perfect example. They have the exclusive license for jockey in India. Now, they didn't try to reinvent fashion or anything like that. They just perfected the quality and, this is the crucial part, the distribution of one single category: innerwear. And by building this massive network, over 2,400 of their own stores, they just achieved total, complete market dominance.
It's a similar story with Balkrishna Industries, or BKT. They saw everybody else scrapping it out over the super crowded passenger car tire market, and they just went, nah, not for us. Instead, they focused on this unglamorous but totally essential niche: heavy-duty off-road tires. We're talking about tires for tractors, for mining equipment, and by doing that, they became a dominant global player.
And you see the exact same pattern with a company like KI Industries. They didn't get caught up chasing the consumer electronics market, which can change on a dime, right? Nope. They focused on the heavy-duty industrial cables and wires, the stuff that powers factories, entire buildings, the national grid. It's a fantastic example of a business that's absolutely vital, but almost completely invisible to the average person.
Okay, so this intense focus, that's only half the story. The other, and arguably just as important ingredient, was patience. And this combination, this is where the real magic happens. A slow, super deliberate start, followed by absolutely explosive growth.
D-Mart is the poster child for this slow burn strategy. For the first 8 years, the founder, Radhakishan Damani, he only opened 29 stores. 29! And he focused obsessively on owning the real estate for his stores. Why? To keep his costs permanently low. It wasn't until he had perfected that model that he finally hit the accelerator and started expanding like crazy, especially after their IPO in 2017.
Bajaj Finance? They followed a really similar, methodical playbook. They started out in a super specific niche, just financing Bajaj's own motorcycles. That's it. But once they mastered that, they carefully expanded, one step at a time. First into other consumer loans, then into things like wealth management. And they just evolved from this little single product lender into the massive financial powerhouse they are today.
So, okay, after all that patience, all that focus on supposedly boring stuff, what was the actual payoff? What happened? Well, for the investors who were patient enough to see the vision, the results were, honestly, they were just stunning.
Just take a look at Relaxo Footwears, a company famous for, for simple, affordable slippers and sandals, right? The kind of business most people would never even look at twice. But over a decade, it gave its shareholders an incredible 11,800% return. Let that sink in. That means your investment would have multiplied 120 times over.
Now, to really put that number into perspective, let's look at this. Over that same 10-year period, the main stock market index, the Sensex, it did okay. It delivered a pretty solid return. But Relaxo's performance? It wasn't just a little better. It was on another planet,
a completely different universe. We're talking about an unbelievable gap that just shows the raw power of this strategy. This wasn't just a good investment. This was legendary.
And here's the thing. Relaxo wasn't some kind of a fluke. This exact same pattern, these mind-blowing returns from seemingly boring companies, it happened again and again across totally different industries.
Remember BKT? That quiet, off-highway tire company we talked about? Well, over 2 decades, it rewarded its long-term shareholders with just a mind-boggling 43,500% return. To put it simply, every single dollar you invested would have turned into $435.
And even in a really complex field like pharmaceuticals, the same pattern held true. A company called Ajanta Pharma focused on very specific, niche treatments that the big pharma giants just ignored. And as this analyst quote points out, the results were, well, they were astounding. The stock became what investors call a multi-bagger, which means it multiplied its value over 100 times in just 6 years. Incredible.
Okay, so what is the big takeaway from all of this? I mean, beyond these incredible numbers, what is the actual repeatable playbook that these titans used? And I think more importantly, what can the rest of us learn from it?
All right, the Titans playbook, it really comes down to 4 pretty simple rules. Rule number 1, dominate a niche. Master something boring that others overlook. 2, be patient and persistent. Focus on getting the fundamentals right before you chase explosive growth. 3, be obsessed with operational excellence. Control your costs, own your assets, nail the quality. And finally, number 4, expand smartly. Use the profits from your main business to fund your next intelligent move. It's a really simple but incredibly powerful formula for building real long-term value, way, way away from all the noise.
Which, it all leaves us with one last big question. In a world that is absolutely obsessed with chasing the next big trend, the next hot thing, is it possible that the real secret to lasting success is actually hiding in plain sight? Maybe. Maybe the answer isn't about finding something totally new, but about mastering something simple and doing it exceptionally, exceptionally well.